Hey guys, in this video I'm going to go over how to set up the Dave Smith Instruments Pro 2 as an effects processor. So how to run sounds through it and affect them. I'm going to cover three general areas. So gating the sound, so how to get the actual sound to go through the synth. Second is effects, so what kind of effects we can apply to it. And thirdly, modulation. So I'm going to go over different ways you can alter parameters over time. Let's get started. Let's initialize the basic patch here so that you can see every step along the way. So we go to global, go to 34 basic program and hit right now. So now I've got the Korg Volca plugged into the audio input, and if I hit play, you'll notice that no sound is actually heard. The only way to get the sound from an external input to be heard is to gate the sound and to bring up the external level input. To get the sound, you can either hold down a key on the keyboard or you can play the sequencer, which will fire gates. So the other step is to, since I want to treat this as an effects unit, I don't want to hear any internal sounds. So I'm just going to turn off the oscillator. You can either do that by lowering the output level or by turning off the oscillator wave on the shape knob. So I'm going to turn it off. And now there's no internal sounds. So the only other thing I have to do is turn up the volume of the external input level. And now since I don't want to hold down a key or have to hold down a key the whole time, I'm just going to hit the hold button here, which will hold down a key, which will effectively turn on the gate indefinitely. And now we can hear the Korg Volca coming through. And as I said, you can also use a sequencer as a gate source. So I'm going to turn off the keyboard gate, turn on the sequencer. I have all the steps on by default. The MIDI clock is produced by the Pro 2 and is being sent to the Korg Volca, so they'll play in the same rhythm. So if I hit play now, because they're synchronized, these gate steps are actually, these 16 gate steps actually correspond to the sequencer divisions on the Korg Volca. That's why it sounds like a continuous stream of notes. But in fact, there are individual gates being fired on every step, so I can turn certain steps off. As you can hear, the sound gets cut off on those steps. So there's various different ways to shape the sound with the Pro 2. The most basic way is using the 4 delay lines here. So let's play around with that. The good thing about having the Volca synced via the MIDI clock of the Pro 2 is that you can use the delay sync feature here. So now my delay from the Pro 2 is, the timing is being synchronized to the beat. That way you get nice rhythmic delay. Let's try the other delays. They're effectively all the same, but you can have a multi-tap delay effect by turning more of them on and setting them to synchronize at different levels, or different rhythms, I should say. The other thing we can do is apply distortion. So let's try that. Let's turn off the delays. Play the sound again. And here we have a global distortion, which is applied to the entire audio signal. And it's an analog distortion. Just going to watch my levels here. covered delays and distortion. The other thing you can add is there's this character section and the oscillator side, which you have decimate, drive, and hack. And we can play around with those. Decimate is sort of I think a bit rate reduction or sample rate reduction, or both. You get this kind of yah-yah vocal sound. We can drive it into the filter. And hack. You can combine all three, of course. Completely destroy the sound. Alright, moving on from the character section, the next thing is we have two filters we can run things by. Filter 1 is low pass only, so let's sweep that. Actually, let's open up the filter on the Volca completely. And now we have the filter on the Pro 2. Turn up the resonance. Add a bit of distortion. Sorry about that. And we have a second filter here, which is either low pass or high pass. Let's turn it on to high pass. And we have a bandpass switch as well. And you can link the two together. And we can also change if they're routed in serial or parallel, which is kind of cool. So that wraps up the general effects section. So as a reminder, we have 4 delay lines, which you can sync to MIDI clock or have them free running. We have the character section with our decimator, the drive, and the hack. Then we have the 2 filters. We have low pass and high pass. And then we have the global distortion, analog distortion here. So it's a pretty powerful unit as an effects processor, and it gets even more powerful when you apply modulation, which is our next section. So let's get into that. Okay, so for the modulation section, I'm just going to cover some basic examples of things you can modulate. This synth has an immense modulation matrix. You have 4 LFOs, you have 2 or 3 primary envelopes, and then you have 2 auxiliary envelopes. So you have 5. You have 16 channels of a 16 or up to 32 step sequencer, which can modulate pretty much all these parameters. Let's dive straight into the sequencer. So let's just apply different effects, modulated effects. A quick way to get to program a modulation route is just to hold the record button and turn the knob you want. So let's move the filter around and see what that sounds like. Let's modulate the resonance. let's go ahead with distortion. Actually, that resonance are probably going to get annoying, so let's tweak that a bit. Let's add some noise via the oscillator 1. That's using the internal sequencer as a modulation source. Let's reinitialize the patch. The other interesting thing we can talk about with modulation is that we can use the Korg Volca's amplitude as a modulation source for internal parameters here as well. And that's done via the envelope follower. Let me turn this off for a second. So basically how an envelope follower works is that it essentially follows the envelope of the sound. So it'll look at the amplitude of the sound coming in from the external input and turn that into essentially control voltage, or in this case just digital signals, which you can use to modulate other parameters. So the way to access that, we can go to the mod section here, and then for our source we'll just scroll through, and let me just find envelope follower. There it is. And as a destination, let's just pick a filter cutoff 1. Let's bring up the amount to max. In the sub oscillator, you have envelope follower attack and release. So you can set, basically alter the shape of that envelope, which is again governed by the external sound coming in. So I've just cranked up the level on the Volca bass, and the effect is a little more pronounced. And hopefully that gives you a good idea of the kinds of things you can do with this synth as an effects unit. If you want to think of it as guitar pedals, you have 4 delay pedals, a distortion pedal, a character pedal with bit crushing. You have 2 analog filters. And on top of that, all these things can be modulated in all kinds of different ways. You have an envelope follower. You can apply the sequencer to any of these parameters. You have 4 LFOs, which I haven't even touched here. And I'm just using this little tabletop synth here as a demonstration, but in theory you can plug in all kinds of sources here, drum machines, guitars, your voice. I hope to do more videos demonstrating all kinds of different sounds coming through this in my other series called Will They Pair, so look out for those. Hopefully this was informational or educational in some way.